Transmitter device activated. Coordinates set for Earth 2.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Earth 2 podcast, your weekly exploration of the DC Comics multiverse and the legacy of their Golden Age characters through the Silver and Bronze Ages of comics. I'm Peter Watson.
And I'm David Steele. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us. We're taking a little step back to the future this week, listeners. We're flashing back to February of 1975 to talk about issue 29 of Kamandi, The Last Boy on Earth. Isn't that right, Peter?
Most certainly is. Yes, a very exciting issue.
Yes, very exciting. Why are we doing issue 29 of Kamandi, listeners? You might be asking. Kamandi has obviously appeared on the show before. A few months ago we did that issue Brave and the Bold with the great Mount Rushmore cover that featured a scene where a character holds up a copy of Brave and the Bold starring Batman, Wildcat and the Joker, and obviously that was enough reason for us to do that issue because it raised the question of which author's Kamandi on if he has this comic and all that sort of stuff. But it also let us address something that we don't really talk about too often on the show. We tend to focus on the alternate realities and other dimensions of the pre-crisis multiverse, but we really do need to spend a little bit of time discussing the possible alternate futures that were on display in the pre-crisis DC Comics multiverse. Now, the Legion have appeared on the show before. We did an early Superboy story, Legion of Super Traitors, and then we talked about the legacy of the Flash when we did the first appearance of the Tornado Twins, much later in the run of Adventure Comics. And it's fair to say that the Legion's future in the 30th century is probably the one that you think of most, or at least I think of most. But there are other futures, obviously, and isn't that right, Peter?
There most certainly are. There's the future of Tommy Tomorrow. There's the 25th century, where Reverse Flash comes from. There's the 64th century, where Abracadabra comes from. Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, had some adventures in the 58th century. I believe his secret identity was Paul Manning, if I remember correctly.
That's right.
In those stories. So yes, there's lots of fantastic, interesting alternate futures out there in DC Comics.
Yeah, and a lot of this stuff is treated very differently after the crisis. We all know the long-term impact that Crisis on Infinite Earths had on the Legion of Superheroes. And the other big, I think, possible alternate future that's sort of on display at this point in our timeline, we're in the mid-70s, is of course that of Kamandi, The Last Boy on Earth, Jack Kirby's amazing creation that kind of riffs on the Planet of the Apes idea and does some absolutely incredible things. And there's a couple of points in the continuity in the mid-70s where the futures of Kamandi and the Legion superheroes kind of coincide. Mm-hmm. There's a later crossover between Karate Kid and Kamandi, which we'll be covering, obviously. But this week, as a prelude to a Superman story we're doing next week, we're doing issue 29. Issue 29 of Kamandi, published on the 6th of February 1975, a few weeks before George Harrison's 32nd birthday. If you worry about such things, I do. And Peter will tell us about the cover, which will make it very clear as to why we're doing issue 29, if you haven't guessed already.
We have in the top corner the usual, the line of DC superstars.
No cigar band at this point. We've gone back in time to the pre-cigar band era of DC Comics.
There we are, those amazing days. When the great disaster had destroyed all else, his name was still alive. The Legend. 25 cents, number 29, May. The serial number's 30566, approved by the Comics Code Authority.
Oh, I had 30564 written down. Oh, well.
Oh, shame. Oh, well. No bingo win for you this week. Oh. Kamandi, The Last Boy on Earth, is the banner. And that takes up about the top third of the cover. But the main image on the cover, it's very exciting. It's like the conclusion of Star Trek 3 with Kirk and Krug fighting, because we have, on top of a cliff, it looks like, Kamandi, and he's scuffling with a big brown ape who's wearing green trunks and green gloves for some reason. He's pushing him back towards a fire pit. Oh no! There's orange haze in the air. It looks quite brutal, let's be honest. But in the foreground, hanging on a rock face, there appears to be the costume of a certain Man of Steel. Yes, Superman's costume. It's hanging there, all alone.
Oh, Peter's trying to make us feel sorry for Superman's costume.
Yes.
You said for some reason, why is the gorilla wearing shorts and boots? Because that's what animals do in the Kamandi timeline, Peter. They wear clothes because they've been evolved.
Yes, I know. Just it's the cut of the trunks, sir.
Well, yeah, they drew your eye. Interesting. Listeners, what draws your eye first on this cover? Write in and let us know. I've always pictured it mentally as being on a coat hanger, but it's not. But something's holding it up. Listeners, what do you think is holding up Superman's uniform? Write into the Earth2podcast@gmail.com and Peter will have a look.
Possibly just well starched.
Right, so again, listeners, this being a Jack Kirby creation, we will do our best to do it justice. We would encourage you to get a copy of Kamandi 29, or maybe grab your copy of the Omnibus, or maybe borrow a copy of the Omnibus or something. This is ultimately quite a moving story, but we shall dig in. A caption kicks us off.
Where do myths and legends come from? Facts lost in antiquity remain alive through the ages in forms which grow stranger with the passing years. In the wake of the great disaster, such a thing has happened. The past has refused to bury someone familiar to us all. Ask Kamandi, the last boy on Earth.
And we get a little circle caption that reads,
Chapter 1.
We start off, we're in a bit of a mountainous area, some trees visible, and we're looking over the shoulder of Kamandi and his pal Ben Boxer. And they're looking up heavenwards, where there appears to be a figure hurtling through the sky. Kamandi points and says, "That's not a bird or a plane, Ben, but it's flying."
After skipping out on military bulldogs and leopard brigands, we run into this.
And we're greeted with a huge double spread. Bottom left-hand corner, there's a little box that reads,
Edited, written and drawn by Jack Kirby. Inked and lettered by D. Bruce Berry, from an idea suggested by Steve Sherman.
And we see that Kamandi and Ben appear to be standing in front of a massive frieze that's been carved into a huge rock face. Inscribed along the top read the words, Tablet of Revelation. And to the left, inscribed, we see the words, Let it be known that we await the return of, and then in huge letters, the words, Mighty One. And there's a very obvious carved statue of a strong human-like figure, and we can see the hint of a familiar S on his chest. He has a cape. We can see the shape of his boots. And there are a number of images which tell a story. And it looks as though, I'm guessing, it's not too clear, all of the captions for each of these images have been inscribed into the rock face as well. The first caption reads,
As set forth by Golgan the gorilla, founder of this tribe. It came to pass that there were days of woe, yea, the world shook and cracked, and swallowed great cities.
And the first image shows buildings collapsing as earthquakes take place, and we can see the ground splitting open and flames burning, great clouds of dust.
Many cried that it was the end of all life, for it was seen that the seas had parted, and the fires from below would split the world into halves.
There's a very lurid image of the globe splitting open and flames bursting out into space. Very, very Jack.
It was a job for Mighty One, and he came out of Clark Kent to do this job. He flew where lightning roared and killed.
And we see a silhouetted form with trunks and a cape flying towards a sort of rendered massive burst of lightning.
He flew in the whirlwinds where nothing could fly.
And we see the silhouette of this figure flying through stormy weather. There's no other way to put it.
Thus did Mighty One descend to the fiery core and scoop up stones upon which mountains could rest.
And there's a couple of images here where we see the caped figure lifting massive boulders and stocking them up, obviously trying to fill the gaps created by the chasms opening up with earthquakes and such like.
So gigantic was this work that no mind could accept it. So great was the peril that even Mighty One saw the face of death.
And the final little stretch of inscription along the bottom of this giant display reads,
When Mighty One was done, the raging fires were capped by miles of stone so huge that it became a new land for all creatures.
Interesting. Now, Kamandi and Ben, taking this all in, Kamandi says, The gorillas in this area seem to be dominated by strange ideas. And contemplating the massive thing in front of them, Ben rubs his chin and says,
It's the story of a new continent told in comic strip terms.
Listeners, get a hold of Kamandi 29, honestly.
Just for that double-page spread alone, surely.
Yeah. Turning away from the great display, Kamandi suddenly exclaims, Ben, behind us!
Apes!
Crack and look at Ben's costume here if you're not familiar with it, listeners. Kamandi's in his usual sawn-off blue denims and boots, but Ben's uniform is sort of an all-in-one red body stocking, his blue boots, a blue belt. There's a ziggy-zag and a circle design on his chest. Ben will appear in the socials, so you'll see him. And then we see what they're looking at, and it's a bunch of the humanoid apes that we're used to in this series. A few of them wearing armour, and one senior-looking one with white hair, wearing purple robes, clasping a massive staff. One of the gorillas in the background yells, The Mighty One! As large as life! Obviously, he thinks that's who Ben is. The old ape yells,
The true reincarnation has come to pass. The legend is fulfilled.
and it seems like a number of the apes yell, Mighty
One has
come
come
back.
back.
They're looking at you, Ben.
It seems that I've been mistaken for this Mighty One.
All the apes are bowing in front of Ben in the next panel. One says,
Do not deny us your great powers.
Oh, your wisdom, says another. Ben, hands on his hips, says,
I'm not sure I have the power or wisdom to fit your needs.
Don't push it, Ben, says Kamandi. Let them do all the talking.
Indeed, in Kamandi's world, the apes are among the many intelligent beasts who do the talking. The great disaster has thrust men back to a primitive, mindless state. It's a dangerous time to be a human. Now it's certain death to be the legend.
Yes, we're into...
Chapter 2.
And all of a sudden, one particularly buff and large brown ape wearing green trunks and green boots and off-green gloves and a yellow belt, he looks like the guy we saw on the cover, obviously. He steps forward, throwing a punch at Ben as he says, Fools! This animal couldn't be the Mighty One! With a crack, he strikes Ben, who falls back, saying, Ugh! One of the other apes says,
No, Zuma, he is scared.
This is another shot of Ben being knocked backwards by Zuma, who's the big brown ape in the green trunks. As Zuma says, He tumbles easily. I don't need kryptonite to flatten him. One of the other apes, presumably the senior one at this point, yells,
Zuma, I order you to cease this blasphemy.
Kamandi, worried about his pal, yells, Stop it! Ben's done nothing to you! But Zuma's not having it. On your feet, oh mighty one! I want one last crack at you!
That's fine with me, Muscles. I'd like a crack at you.
And then the next panel we see a massive
whammo
as Ben takes a pot at Zuma. Ben continues,
And I won't use any kryptonite either.
As with a... He brings his fist down on the back of Zuma's head. Zuma can only exclaim, Ah!
Zuma is floored by Ben, but his great strength helps him rebound to battle.
Yeah, Zuma goes for it, saying, Arrogant animal, I'll destroy you!
No way, Zuma.
And from the side, offering encouragement, Kamandi cries, Drop him, Ben! But then the senior ape steps forward.
Stop this! You mock the ancient rules. Mere combat cannot reveal the Mighty One. He must demonstrate his powers against overwhelming odds.
One of the younger armoured apes chips in at this point, saying, This can be settled on the proving grounds of Nashnil.
That is the way it must be.
To which Zuma says, Senile fool! This is but a clever animal in fancy dress.
Call me that again and I'll...
Hold it, Ben, says Kamandi, interrupting. If you're not familiar with Kamandi, listeners, the evolved animals refer to humans as animals. It's a great book. I've started reading it since I collected my full set. It's stunning. Kamandi, appealing to the senior ape, says, Tell me, sir, did this Mighty One wear the symbol S on his costume? It was a bit vague on the tablet.
Bless me! The Mighty One is known to one such as you. It is a sign, a day of wonders. Come, young one, you too may share in this.
Senior ape puts a hand round Kamandi's shoulder and they start to walk forward. One of the other apes chips in with, It shall be the first conquest of the demonstration course.
Kamandi and Ben are led to a structure built by the apes.
It's very interesting because we can see letters carved onto the blocks that they're all moving past. As the senior ape says,
Forward to the demonstration course.
Panel 2 of page 8, we see a large catapult-type construction, which has a seat in it, and there's an ape reclining gracefully on his chair. He looks very much like Zuma, he's dressed identically. And there's another ape winding what appears to be a handle at the front, which is rope coiled up. Ben and the senior ape and Kamandi are there, and the senior ape is saying,
Behold, a claimant is about to prove he is the Mighty One reincarnated.
You mean there is competition for the title? And then Ben, observing everything that's going on in the mechanism that the ape is sat on, says,
That's a catapult. They're going to fling that ape at the sky.
He may be killed. One of the other apes there says,
Many claimants are killed and injured, but they must prove they can fly higher than the tallest building.
And this obviously sparks a memory in Ben, for he says,
Kamandi, that flying object we saw, it was one of these cult-worshipping apes.
And then the mechanism of the catapult is released, and with a whoosh, the ape that was in the chair goes hurtling up into the sky as he yells,
Up, up and away!
Caption for the first panel on page 9.
The ape leaves the ground with the speed of a missile.
And we see him wide-eyed as he cries,
See, I fly! I fly!
And Ben observes.
That's no lie.
We're back down on the ground for panel 2 as we see the poor ape hurtling through the air as the senior ape says,
He will fail. It has been so since the earliest days of our tribe.
But why does this go on?
Their belief in reincarnation drives them on, Kamandi.
I hope those trees break his fall. I hope he lives, observes the last boy on Earth as we see the ape start to plummet towards some trees in the distance.
Oh dear.
Zuma steps forward at this point, saying, You won't, animal. You'll die.
Hold, Zuma!
Ben doesn't have to fly, says Kamandi. It's too easy. He can do it without a catapult.
Talking is not demonstrating. He must prove that he's the mighty one. Now, wait a minute.
He can prove it.
I can?
Of course he can. Didn't the mighty one have a secret identity? Well, Ben's got one. See that disc? Kamandi points to the design on Ben's uniform. All Ben has to do is press it.
This is surely a magic I must see with my own eyes.
And deadpan, amazing delivery from Ben here as he says,
Guess I can't bug out now. Kamandi knows that Ben Boxer is a mutant, that his kind has survived the great disaster by developing a cyclo-heart.
Don't disappoint him, Ben. Show him how you fishin', says Kamandi to his pal, who says,
Stand back, you young promoter.
Puts his right hand to the disc on his chest, and
Like a biological cyclotron, Ben's heart reaches critical mass. Then
there's a massive
woof! The change occurs. Ben now has a body as tough as steel.
Yeah, we see Ben kind of looking like a cross between one of the Metal Men and Colossus, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
Kamandi turns to the senior ape and says, How's that for proof?
It cannot be disputed. He has done a miraculous thing.
Zuma's not convinced. He yells, A trick! A trick!
Don't try duplicating it, Zuma.
I am the mightiest of my tribe. I challenge you to the supreme test of strength. Move! Kamandi takes Ben by the wrist at this point, saying, I don't know what they're up to now, but you've got to do it.
Is that so?
And then Zuma yells, It is so. Move on.
A legend distorted by time still rules the mind and galvanizes the body. Alexander faced the Gordian knot before he gained his greatness. Arthur drew the sword from the stone to become a king. But to fill the shoes of the mighty one is an overpowering suicidal task. It can't be done. He was one of a kind. Ben Boxer must deceive or die.
And we've reached chapter 3. And there's a weird sort of stone arena as the site for this large splash image. Lots of apes can be seen gathered round, looking on, as down on the floor of the pit. We see the senior ape, we see Kamandi, we see Ben still in his metallic form, and we see Zuma. At the heart of all is a massive stone globe. The senior ape is saying,
Before you lies the task. Only the mighty one can fulfill it.
And looking at this massive circular spherical rock, Kamandi asks, Holy cow! What is it?
It's a boulder, Mr. Brain. The question is, what am I supposed to do?
Zuma puts his shoulder to the globe and says, I'll do it. I'll move the daily planet. Are you paying attention to all these hints, listeners? There'll be a quiz in a little while.
Zuma strains against the impossible. He is willful and strong. But is he the mighty one?
And we see Zuma in close-up straining to try and move the globe as he's saying, I'll do it. I'll do it.
Every muscle responds. An iron will seeks to transcend itself.
However,
the mammoth boulder defies his mammoth effort. It stands as it always has, silent, unconquerable.
And poor Zuma falls to the ground beside the globe, and he can only exclaim, Ugh. Senior Ape steps forward to him, saying,
You failed, Zuma, but it is not to your shame. This is a job for a giant.
An embarrassed Zuma, however, replies, Be gone! Be gone! Senior Ape turns to Ben and Kamandi.
Now, animal, if this giant is within you, come forth and do his work.
Ben rubs his hands together, saying,
Huh? I can hardly wait.
Ben, I'm sorry I got you into this, but all you have to do is move the thing, even a little.
Sure, it's a cinch for the mighty one.
Ben reaches forward, places his hands on the globe.
Ben's steel foot applies pressure to the ground beneath the boulder. The ground begins to crack.
Yes, we see Ben's right foot pressing down on the ground, and there are some lovely
Clink, clink.
sound effects. Kamandi thinks, he's digging a hollow. It'll unbalance the boulder. We see Ben stretching his arms round to try and grab as much of the globe as he can, and he says,
Kamandi, get out of the way! Suddenly, to the astonishment of the spectators, the great boulder rolls into the hollow.
yes, there's a wonderfully large
Rumble.
globe pitches backwards into the dent that Ben has created. Kamandi cries, Ben, you did it! You did it!
You mean I faked it?
There's then a massive sound effect as the boulder sort of shifts and settles. It bumps Ben slightly and Ben cries,
Time to split. The Old One and Zuma watch in speechless wonder. Then...
the Old One speaks.
See, the Daily Planet has been moved. He is indeed the Mighty One.
Not yet. Not in Zuma's eyes.
a howling crowd joins the dispute.
Yes, we see a whole nice array of ape lads stepping forward. They all cry in turn,
I agree with Zuma. I'm still not convinced.
"Ah, this is not the Mighty One.
Hail, Mighty One!
No, no, I demand one more test."
One more test.
And as Kamandi and Ben face them all, Zuma steps forward saying, "Do you hear that? Zuma's followers are not fooled so easily. You haven't won yet."
What do you want me to do? Move the world? That moment, the Old One calms the shouts.
They do not mock you, Mighty One. They ask awesome proof from an awesome being.
That's great, but I'm bowing out. Let's go, Kamandi.
Then you would abandon your noble creed?
"No," cries Kamandi. "The Mighty One will stay. On with the test."
Hey!
"Please, Ben, we can't let them down. We can't desert the Mighty One."
What, you too?
And as they move over, we see a target, a large comedy-style traditional target, a red circle, a white circle, a blue circle, another red circle, on a board, being wheeled into position, and we see the barrel of a massive gun looming into the top of the panel as well. And one of the other apes is saying,
Line up the gun sights.
Kamandi continues his conversation with Ben. "I know about him. I've read about him. He's worth all the risk."
Why, you're nothing but a fan, a hero-worshipping fan.
One of the apes grabs Ben's arm to position him, saying, "Stand here."
Proceed with the test. The Mighty One must be faster than a speeding bullet.
And at this, Kamandi and Ben both turn towards the voice and exclaim,
Huh? Suddenly, a Gatling gun opens fire.
Kamandi leaps out of the way, crying, "Yeah!" And we see Ben being struck by bullet upon bullet as he stands in front of the target. That takes us to the top of page 16. Caption reads Chapter 4, and some more captioning reads,
So heroes may never die, both young and old shall cry, Save the supersuit.
As the bullets continue to fly, we see Kamandi yelling, "Ben! Ben!"
The firing stops. The smoke clears.
See, the target has been shattered, absolutely broken to bits by the onslaught. Ben's pulling himself to his feet. He doesn't seem to be damaged or hurt. Kamandi runs forward saying, "Ben! You're alive! You're alive!" Senior Monkey says,
He evaded the rain of bullets.
Zuma says, "No, he didn't. I saw him struck time and again." Ben, as he gets to his feet, says,
You apes can argue the point, but I give thanks to a steel skin.
at this point, the senior ape bows before Ben, saying,
All doubts are swept away. You are in truth the Mighty One.
and then Ben reaches for the circle in his chest, saying,
Then I trust there's no more need for my secret identity. Fission!
and with a... Ben changes back to his normal form as Kamandi cries, "What? He's seen it before. Why is he being puzzled?" Anyway, Senior Ape, Old One, continues,
Now you may discard that alien costume. We are keepers of the original.
"What?" says Kamandi. "You mean that you've still got..."
Open the doors to the vault of the supersuit.
We see two very... one of them looks... Who's the guy that the Forever People combine and form?
The Infinity Man.
Yeah, one guy looks a bit like the Infinity Man. A couple of apes opening massive doors on the floor. We see stairs leading downwards.
Suddenly,
Ben, look out! Cries Kamandi as Zuma leaps forward and bangs Ben in the back of the head with a
Zomp!
curse you, he cries.
Enraged by failure and frustration, Zuma the ape runs amok.
Yes, we see Zuma pounding down the stairs yelling, "The suit of Mighty One belongs to me! To me!"
Kamandi pursues the maddened ape into the depths of the vault, where the dampened fires of the great disaster still burn.
Yes, very interesting shot. We can see the burning fires and Kamandi and Zuma running along a ledge above them. "What are you up to, Zuma?" "It's mine! It's mine!"
Then Kamandi rounds a stony corridor and sees,
Wide-eyed, Kamandi exclaims, "Great Scott!"
like the golden fleece of ages past, the suit of Mighty One waits for the return of its original owner.
And we see, there's no other way of putting it, listeners, we see Superman's costume sort of strung up. It looks as though it's kind of hanging off a kind of a frame. We see his boots to one side, the familiar S, the trunks, the blue body stocking, the red cape. Kamandi says, "That costume! It could only have belonged to him." Zuma grabs at the uniform, saying, "It's mine now. Zuma claims it."
Kamandi is seized by an emotion he cannot understand. He must save that suit at any cost.
As Zuma grabs at the cape, Kamandi runs forward, sticking his hand into Zuma's face. "What?" exclaims the ape. "Drop it! Drop it! Nervy little animal! You're flirting with death!"
Zuma lashes out and deals a smashing blow to his young besieger.
Yes, there's a wham sound effect as Zuma strikes Kamandi. Kamandi falls back with an "ugh." See Zuma dragging Superman's uniform, and then he lifts it up in the next panel saying, "Ha ha! With this, I shall rule as the Mighty One." In the foreground we see Kamandi getting his bearings and he reaches forward, grabs a rock.
But the ape's triumph is short-lived.
As Kamandi spins, throws the rock, which strikes Zuma in the face with a
Clop!
sound effect. He drops the cape and moves forward, saying, "Now you've done it! Your doom is sealed!" And he's standing on Superman's cape at this point. Kamandi says, "Take your foot off that suit! Let go of it!" And he pulls at the cape, which sends Zuma flying backwards into the lake of lava. That's the only way I can put it. He falls backwards into the open chasm of flames.
Zuma screams and vanishes into the fiery pits. Suddenly, Ben Boxer appears.
Kamandi runs to him. Ben hugs him. Kamandi saying, Ben, it was horrible. I...
Little fool, he might have killed you.
You see the senior ape, one of the other apes arriving as Kamandi says, I couldn't help it. I had to save the suit. I know who owns it. I know that somewhere he's still alive. Ben holds the suit out towards the senior ape, saying,
Hear that, old one? The true Mighty One shall return for this. He shall appear as his true self and claim it. It is never to be touched until then.
And we see the suit hung back on its frame, the boots beside it, as Ben and Kamandi look on. Senior ape can be heard saying,
You have won the suit. Thus your order shall be obeyed.
So be it, says Kamandi. Not even the great disaster could conquer him.
Let's go, Kamandi. We've got to find Landbridge, the new continent.
Another very small caption reads,
Next issue on sale during the first week in March.
And we get the blurb for next issue. Do you want it? You may as well have it.
Lambridge, eh? Wait till you see what they find. Next, UFO, the wildest trip ever.
Well, listeners, we had an absolute mare recording that. My internet crashed for about half an hour in the middle, but obviously with Peter's editing skills, you won't even notice.
Yes.
Very interesting. You know, aside from the comic books and a couple of, appearing Kamandi stories, he holds up an issue of Demon at one point, and obviously in that Brave and Bold he met Batman.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first real mention of Superman in Kamandi's continuity, and it's the little frieze display at the start is very interesting because it obviously tells the story of part of what happened in the Great Disaster.
Yes, it's very exciting. It's also quite revealing as well that it seems to be in the future at some point they do realise that Superman is Clark Kent.
Yes.
He came out of Clark Kent.
He came out of Clark Kent spelled Kla-Kent to do the job.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating. It's the Chinese whisper sort of thing, isn't it? Consonantal shift, the thing sort of evolving. And there's a few other, obviously, clear references to Superman in the mythology, like, the apes talk about kryptonite, the big globe is referred to as the Daily Planet. And
The up and away phrase.
yeah, is it implied that this great globe which Ben manages to shift in that chapter, is that the actual globe from the top of the planet building, or is it just a rock that has been given the name?
Oh, could be.
The faster than a speeding bullet trial.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So it's obviously all these elements of the Superman mythology have lasted until the time of the Great Disaster. It's fascinating.
Yep. And not even Superman could save the Earth from the Great Disaster. Of course, Superman's costume is indestructible.
Yes.
Made out of indestructible material. So that is why it's still, in case you're wondering, that is why it still exists and is quite pristine.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting that the man himself at this point, Kamandi Shuri is still around, but the man himself may have gone. I mean, it's interesting. This is where we should probably talk a little bit about DC's Countdown series of the 2000s. Because that did a very interesting thing a similar sort of thing where it brought in elements of the Legion of Superheroes future and the Great Disaster Kamandi future, and kind of tied a lot of them together. Karate Kid was back in present day. Karate Kid not dead, it revived, was back in the present day, and we actually saw the Great Disaster sort of play out during Countdown. Countdown was another weekly series that DC did. Uh-huh. In my opinion, not quite as successful as 52 had been.
No, definitely not. 52 is absolutely outstanding. Countdown, I think, if I remember rightly, started well. I haven't read it since. It started well and then kind of meandered and got too much caught up in setting up Final Crisis.
There was a lot of tie-in series and stuff, and a lot of tie-in one-shots to Countdown. So it was kind of doing what 52 was doing, but on a bit of a bigger scale. And some of it was better than others. There were some nice one-shots detailing. I think they called them the Challengers of Beyond or something like that. And it was Kyle Rayner, Donna Troy, and Jason Todd.
Yeah.
Lumping around all the various Elseworlds trying to find Ray Palmer. A lot of them were quite funny, and there was a lot of tie-in miniseries like Countdown to Adventure and Countdown to Mystery. Was that the one that Dr. Fate and Eclipso were in? And there was lots of other little one-shots.
Countdown Arena, the one with Lord Havoc and the Extremists, he had that as well. Arena was good, enjoyed that one.
There was loads and loads of it, and I suppose if we talk about it now, it means we don't have to talk about it in our post-crisis hangover period. Reading this again, I had Countdown in mind because I think Countdown was probably inspired. A lot of what Countdown was doing seemed to be inspired by this story. The idea that the heroes were around when the Great Disaster happened and they tried to stop it.
Well, Countdown's, as I said, something I haven't read or even thought about really since the time. So I had not even considered any of these topics that you're raising just now, and
there you go.
It's quite refreshing. I like it. I like it. It makes more sense of Countdown to me now.
Yeah, I mean, it was something that kind of at the time I was always a little bit more interested in the Kamandi stuff than the Fourth World stuff. So there was stuff with Karate Kid and one of Joe Damsel's bodies, and Jimmy Olsen getting turned into Turtle Man. There was loads. I mean, I'm not suggesting by any stretch that we both do a reread of Countdown before we record next week's episode, because it would be impossible. We're talking about 100 comics probably all in.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, we've mentioned the Brave and the Bold story, which we did a few months ago now. That wasn't published until April 1975. So this Superman story in issue 29 is actually the first time that they've really properly folded Kamandi into the main sort of DC continuity. So it's very interesting from that point of view as an issue of Kamandi, but it makes me feel a bit sad that Superman tried to stop the Great Disaster and was able to help with some of it, but ultimately might not have been fully successful.
Yeah, and where was everyone else? Where was the Justice League? Where were the Teen Titans? Where were the Metal Men? Are they kicking about somewhere? Are there wrecked parts of those robots somewhere? Did Red Tornado explode again, trying to save the Earth from the Great Disaster? Who knows? It's sadly not explained.
Yeah, and there is not an issue of Kamandi where Superman pops up and we see him again.
A naked Superman, because obviously he's looking for his costume.
Yeah. Come on. Take it seriously, please. Trust you to lower the tone when I'm trying to be serious and emotive. No, but of course, as we said already, Karate Kid and Kamandi cross over in a couple of years, so we'll do those issues when we get to them. I already have a few foreign covers for those ones, listeners. You'll be no doubt astonished to learn. I mean, everything about it is just so poignant. The cover blurb with the legend and the fact that all these little things are sort of evoked. It's quite a bog standard story. There's not an awful lot to it. It's very uncomplicated. Once again, Kamandi and Ben get pulled up by a bunch of animals and then they have a fight with them and then they leave at the end. This is very near the end of Jack's run on the series. Yeah. Obviously, it must be said. Yeah, I've rambled enough there. What's your thoughts then?
I loved the opening to chapter 4 where you've got all the Gatling gun fire and you've got Kamandi, like big close up of him, and he's shouting, Ben! Ben! This blonde-haired kid's shouting. It just had Luke Skywalker flashbacks, to be perfectly honest.
Of course. Maybe that's where George Lucas got the idea.
George Lucas getting the idea for Star Wars from Jack Kirby comics.
Man, he ripped off Edgar Rice Burroughs wholesale.
Uh-huh.
Let's be honest. But anyway, that's another argument for another podcast.
Yes, but yeah, I love that. This is very much the standard format of Kamandi. It's like one of these serialized TV shows. It's like The Littlest Hobo kind of thing, or Incredible Hulk.
Yes.
You know, Kamandi and Ben go from place to place, have an adventure every issue or every week on the TV show, and get involved in some kind of adventure, and then they move on. And it's the format of it, and it's a tried and tested format. And yeah, absolutely love it.
I miss the days of that type of TV show. I'm really bored with, long arcs and seeds and dropped hints and all such like. I mean, I think recent Doctor Who's done far too much of that. That was one thing I liked about The Mandalorian, was quite a lot of the time it was just episode of the week. But anyway.
I only watched the first series of that. I've just don't have time for these shows anymore. There's too many.
I know.
There's
too much. There's too much. I still haven't seen that Cloak and Dagger TV series from a few years ago, and I loved Cloak and Dagger when I was a kid. So
I forgot it existed, so no.
It's an interesting one. I mean, it's quite a big tease in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It's also, and the nub of it, why we're doing it, is it's interesting that this is another version of the future which features Superman.
Mm-hmm.
Does it contradict? Because the things I don't think there's ever a point when we're told when the great disaster happened and when Kamandi is actually set. I got the sense reading it that it was maybe a couple of 100 years in the future.
Yeah.
Because a lot of structures are still there, and
I've
never had the sense that it was 1,000 years in the future like the Legion was supposed to be.
No, although how the animals have suddenly evolved is always the big question, isn't it?
We know it's part of the cataclysm, like, humans have regressed and animals have evolved. And that was the thing. In Countdown, they sort of mentioned I can't remember the specifics. I think it was a virus or something that was released that caused the animals to start mutating, and so that was.
Yeah,
I'm going to go back and reread some of Countdown. Actually, listen. So it's interesting that the Legion of Superheroes future takes place. That's always been well defined to be roughly 1,000 years ahead of when the story is published, and that future of the Legion doesn't show a ruined civilization where the animals have risen up and taken over, and humans have regressed. So it's even just with that in mind, I think it's fair to say that you can't really reconcile them too easily. I think it was too much of a jump to sort of say that things got better after Kamandi's time, and by the time of the 30th century, whatever, everything was fine.
Yep. Brian Bendis in his Legion of Superheroes Millennium 2-part miniseries kind of tried to tie all this together and make a timeline and make sense of it.
I remember the variant covers now that you mention that, because Kamandi was on the cover of one of them, wasn't he?
Yep, but it was not hugely done well. It was just an attempt to try and have everything happen.
Right.
Which, to be honest, is kind of like the hyper time theory. But anyway, he tried to explain it all and have Thorne be immortal all the way through it and live through the whole thing as well. But I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of Bendis' time at DC. I don't think it really played out very well. I could see where he was going with it, but it's not a story I hugely enjoyed, and his Legion was just an absolute nothing, really.
Yeah, I would need to revisit it. Actually, it's been. I think I do remember reading it, but I don't remember how it played out terribly well.
Yeah,
that was always in the last 5 years or so. So that's way beyond our remit.
Oh yes, without a doubt.
If you've got it to hand, I would have to really hunt for it actually for the issues. I'm sure I've got them somewhere. Listeners, if you've got that Millennium thing to hand, you can have a look and see, and please share your thoughts on the socials.
Yeah, but that's the only attempt I can think of to reconcile all of those timelines into one format, apart from something like History of the DC Universe, but that basically wiped out all of Kamandi's timeline completely.
That's right. Spoilers. Yeah. Yeah, well, that's it, which is why one of the reasons why we're sort of doing this, because this timeline is being published and featuring, crossovers with Batman and Superman. There are other issues, of course, of Brave and Bold and DC Presents that feature Batman and Superman and Kamandi. We'll decide when we get to them if we're going to do them or not. We might not.
Yeah.
Also worth mentioning that Superman and Kamandi both appeared together in the 1993 Elseworlds 6-issue miniseries Kamandi at Earth's End, which I remember being on sale when I worked in Stateside Comics. I don't think I read it though. But obviously, as we said, there's another issue that we're going to do next week, which deals with the future aspect as well. Bear in mind some of the conversations we've had today when we talk about the story we do next week. I just love the Kirby aesthetic of the 70s stuff. It's such an easy read, but it's a very satisfying read.
Yeah, action adventure, and as I said, it is formulaic series of the week. It is an adventure serial.
Yeah.
They're always moving on. They're always on a quest somewhere. It's just pure fun and bombastic action. And you've got to love those Jack Kirby page 2 and 3 double page spreads. He does it throughout this era, and they're fantastic. So good.
Yeah.
So good.
As you say, I mean, Jack's only in Kamandi for another 5 or 6 issues at this point. He's gone, I think pretty much gone by the end of the year. But there's no sense that he's kind of phoning it in.
Yeah, true. It is fun in that double-page spread that Ben Boxer says, it's like a comic strip.
Yes, how meta.
So obviously Ben is familiar with comics, as we know from that Brave and Bold issue we did.
Ben wasn't in that one, was he?
No, he wasn't in that one, no.
I need to resume my Kamandi reading. When I finally finish Dylan Goes Electric and Toby Haydock's book about the Quatermass experiment, I might get back onto Kamandi. Steve was starting to read it at the same time as me as well. And I think he stalled because I stalled, so apologies, Steve, if you're listening.
Shall we move on to the reader reaction to Kamandi at the time?
Yeah, so Kamandi's letters page, listeners, is at this point like 6 issues behind, so if you jump to issue 35 to read along, there's a few letters of comment on this one, and the first one goes like this.
Dear team, I just finished Kamandi 29, and I must say that I thoroughly enjoyed it. Being a neophyte to the saga of The Last Boy on Earth, having only read the last 4 issues, I have some questions floating through my mind, but I was impressed with the little touches in the story. Clark Kent, National.
Ah, right, of course, national obviously means national, doesn't it? I didn't think of that.
Of course, yes.
Ah.
DC and the entrance to the demonstration course.
Ah, that's right. Of course, I did mention that in the description, so that's clearly what they are.
Did I miss anything? I know it would be overkill, but I sort of wish Kamandi had said Great Caesar's Ghost on page 18 instead of Great Scots. All in all, I feel that you have accomplished a great feat by showing us our vice of hero worship in comic art allegory. It's read well on all planes, and that's from Bob Robinson, Lincoln, Nebraska.
Of course, yeah, so looking back to page 7, this can be settled on the proving grounds of national, and then they see it's clearly a D and a C at the top of page 8, so that's the proving grounds of, that was National Publications, that was the offices, that's where that was all taking place. Oh my goodness. Right, well, the editorial response says, we're newer to the editorial side of Kamandi than you are to the readership, so we can't be sure you caught all the clues in number 29. Ah, interesting. But on the other hand, it's always an extra pleasure when you can discover new depths to a story upon rereading it. Yes, well, okay. That doesn't help. Peter's getting a big close-up of my physog as I read from my phone. I apologise, Peter. Dear editor, Kamandi 29 won't go down in history as a Kirby classic, but it was a great addition to the Kamandi mythos. I've often wondered about the nature of the great disaster, and little by little you're supplying comments and hints about it. It is also interesting to find that Superman played a role in helping humankind survive the disaster. I hope that in future issues you elaborate on the Mighty One and his role in the saga of Earth after disaster. I'd also like to see a future meeting between Kamandi and Superman. I also hope that the future will see a link-up between the characters and events chronicled in Kamandi and those which comprise the Kirby tetralogy. New Gods, Forever People, etc. You've tied Superman into the universe of Kamandi and the Chronicles of the New Gods, so now he forms a link bridging the two. That's fair. I still have a sneaking hunch that the Great Disaster is some way linked to the Orion Darkseid battle presaged by the New Gods series. Well, that's interesting because, as I said on the chat about Countdown, Darkseid and everyone else, the other New Gods, were involved. Huge amounts of Kirby stuff was ripped off for Countdown, it must be said. Letter continues, I must confess that the simplicity of most of your DC stories when taken individually makes them easy, enjoyable reading. But when I look at any series, be it Kamandi, The Demon or OMAC in a collective sense, the complexity and interrelationships are fascinating. I think this probably contributes to the saleability of your mags, since the younger reader can enjoy the simple pleasure of the tale of adventure, while the older fan can enjoy the growing, developing Kirby mythos. That very well observed comment is from Jonathan Bacon, Lamoni, Iowa.
Editorial response is, the best stories in any genre are those that can be read and enjoyed by both old and young. And we'd be happy if we succeeded in that half as well as classics like Alice in Wonderland.
That was a complete non-response, wasn't it, to everything? I mean, I suppose by this point, if Kirby's left DC, there's not going to be much chance of a crossover between Kamandi and the New Gods.
Very true.
Anyway, of course, the New Gods would be revived in the pages of the first issue special, and we will return to first issue special before too long. Final letter, then.
Dear people, from the day I bought Kamandi #1 those few years ago, has that been years already? I have known that someday someone would try and team up Kamandi with another of DC's heroes. I loathed the idea, knowing that it would completely destroy the Kamandi legend. I hereby concede that I was wrong. Jack did the honours himself, and when I saw Superman's costume in the cover of issue 29, I flipped. I was in despair. And then I read the story. It was perfect for every type of reader. For those who would like to believe that Kamandi lives in the future of Superman's world, then the fact that the hero's costume is present and the hero missing is all fine.
For those who like to think Kamandi is the future of our own troubled world and Superman is just a fantasy, it could be that the gorillas got hold of some old comics and thought them to be real. In that case, the costume might be from the old TV series, or just a child's playsuit. Kamandi himself believes in Superman apparently, but then he has only hand-me-down information from his grandfather, books, magazines, microfilms, and comics. It was the best thing you could do, leaving out Superman completely, and just reviving the legend. Issue 29 wins a AA+ in my book. So says Perry Wilson, Sonaro, California.
No editorial response. As we say, by the time of issue 35, Jack Kirby is long gone. I've really enjoyed reading this one. As I say, we were interrupted by the collapse of my internet, so that might have truncated part of the conversation because we were a little bit grumpy. Or at least I was. But no, it's an interesting one to talk about and to consider that, you know, as we say, the alternate futures and what have you. And next week's comic, we'll do something. Should we tell everyone what we're doing next week, just in case they want to try and track a copy down to read along with it?
Yes, let's do so. This whole episode, dear listener, is a prelude to next week's coverage of Superman issue 295.
Yes.
So dig out your copies of that if you have them. If not, see what you can source.
Yep. It's another interesting one. We shall say no more. We shall talk about it at the time.
Mm-hmm. But what did you think about this issue? What do you think about our plans for next week? You can write to us and let us know. You can email us at theearth2podcast@gmail.com. Make sure you follow us on social media because we're putting up some lovely bonus material for this and indeed every episode. On Facebook, Instagram and Blue Sky, we're at the Earth 2 Podcast, and on Twitter, we're at podcast_Earth2, and it is the number 2 for all of our socials.
It certainly is. If you're feeling generous, you could consider going to wherever it is you receive your podcast and leaving us a positive review. Such things are good for our optics. Alternatively, or maybe additionally, you can find your way to our link tree and buy Peter the price of a beverage in our coffee page as he sits in Cafe Nero or... Where is it?
Yeah, Cafe Nero.
Is it Cafe Nero? I can't remember if it's Cafe Nero.
Yes.
Because was there not one morning it wasn't open? You had to go somewhere else. Where was
I had to go to Costa that one time, yes.
Yeah. Oh my God, listeners, he was livid.
I know.
So yes, as Peter tidies all this up and cuts out half an hour of dead air as we kind of left the recording going and all that sort of stuff. But anyway, such things will not concern you, hopefully. I'm off to soak my head and try and calm down.
On that bombshell, I've been Peter.
And I've been David. Take care. We'll see you again soon on
The Earth 2 Podcast.
Transmatter cube activated. Return coordinates set for Earth Prime.
Right, an hour and 53 minutes I've got here. So let's see what this ends up being. I'm going to say it's going to be 45 minutes. The change occurs. Ben now has a body as tough as steel.
Yep, you see...
As David Steele.